Hi, this is Jared from the Svendsen. Well, my brother is still not doing so hot, a little on the blue side these days, but fortunately for you, he has done a lot of recording over the past several months, and so we still have plenty of content coming your way. In fact, on this episode, my brother and I, along with Logan, share our thoughts on our top 50 bands of all time. On this episode, we focus primarily on numbers 41 through 50. So I think if you listen and you're a music lover, you're definitely going to find some new things to check out. We had a lot of fun recording this one. And soon we'll be revisiting, looking at 40 to 31, and then eventually getting into our top 10. Also in this episode, my brother shares a little bit about what he thinks of as the mysteries of Christianity. And then finally, there's bonus content where Joey and Matt Johnson discuss Matt Johnson's days in Roadside Monument. So definitely a great episode. You guys are going to really dig this, and we definitely appreciate you listening to us. Peace.
What's up, everybody? Hope you are all doing well. Before we get into this music discussion, I want to talk a little bit about mystery. Something I've been thinking about a pretty good deal, and something that it seems like some people of faith are, and I'd say some, are a little bit weirded out from. And it's a word that's being used a lot, and I think for good reason, and it's absolutely necessary before we can even have faith that we accept an element of mystery. And it's pretty simple, honestly. We'll just start right here, is we actually claim to have faith in a God that always existed. I mean, that's crazy. Like we can't even wrap our minds around that. Like, what is it like to never have been created? Like, God's not self-created. Apparently, he never was created. He always was. Like, how does that happen? Our finite minds cannot even come close to picking up on that and figuring that out. So I was thinking the other day what it's like to be in a two-dimensional world. So let's think about, let's say you're going through a book and you see a photograph, so a real picture of a family having a picnic, and let's say they come to life. And you realize, oh my gosh, these people are living beings. They have a life. And you flip the page and you see their home. And you flip the page and you see where they work. You flip the page, you see where the kids play soccer. And it's like this whole two-dimensional world where people are living their lives and having their cultures and all of that. Well, first of all, if you're in a three-dimensional world and you try to communicate to these two-dimensional beings, they're not really going to understand what's going on. You're in 3 dimensions, they're in 2 dimensions. And let's say you take your finger and you press it onto the page. Well, they just see the tip of your finger. That's really freaky, and they don't understand that. They just completely are mystified by what in the heck is going on. But let's just say, for this example's sake, that you can actually articulate and explain to these two-dimensional beings what it's like to live in 3 dimensions, what it's like to feel in 3 dimensions, what it's like to live and drive and look at scenery and play hide and go seek in 3 dimensions. No matter how well you can communicate, you just can't break down the boundaries they have, natural boundaries, and understanding 3 dimensions. They live in 2 dimensions. They cannot pick it up. Now, maybe you can figure out some ways in which you can eliminate some confusion and maybe heighten some sense of awareness, but bottom line is there's always going to be a gap of communication because it's 2 completely different worlds. Well, when I think about God, I think that gap of understanding is way more significant between us and God than it is between a two-dimensional family and a three-dimensional family. That's just kind of my guess, just because you go off on a list about the things about God, and it's pretty crazy. Like, I can't wrap my mind around it, and yet we think that we can sufficiently understand God by using language that we created. Like, we can actually contain God within human language. And I think it's about time for, especially in our Western civilization of trying to figure things out and have black and white and we resist gray areas, and we want formulas and explanations, and we want to be on the right side and be able to argue against the wrong side and all of that. It may be time for us to pause and recognize what we have our faith in. We don't even know partially. Like, there's just no way. And I know that some people raise their hand and say, yeah, but the Bible tells us a lot. And yeah, but the Holy Spirit tells us a lot. Yes, about something that our minds can't grasp. We can't wrap our minds around a being that always existed. We can't. And so that's my little spiel on mystery and how I believe that going into faith at the very starting line, we've got to start with recognizing our limitations and maybe even rest in that a little bit. I think that'd be a good idea. Well, some of you don't want to hear that bull crap. You came here to listen to the music discussion and hear me, Jared, and Logan's top 41 through 50 bands. So let's not hesitate. Here you go. Hey guys, as promised, my brother, myself, and our friend Logan, we're going to go through our 50 favorite bands of all time, and we've got some other people that we have had chime in a little bit, and I'm going to treat you to that right now. As the end of this episode, I catch up with Matt Johnson, who helped me basically co-wrote my book Fundamentalist with me, did all the editing and just made it sound really good and all that kind of professional stuff that I don't know how to do. But he was also the drummer of a band that my brother and I listened to back in the day, old school tooth and nail band called Roadside Monument. And so we hit up a bunch of tooth and nail artists and some friends of ours asking to send their top 50 bands. And so I'm going to go ahead and tell you Matt Johnson's top 11 bands, and I'm obviously not going to read 50 bands right now, but we'll put it on maybe our Facebook page. But why 11? Because 11 is Scaterd Few, and if you haven't listened to the album Sin Disease by Scaterd Few, it's a must listen to. It's one of the greatest albums ever. And his top 10, Primus, number 10. Number 9 is The Smiths. Number 8, Circle Jerks. Number 7, Dead Kennedys. Number 6, Cro-Mags. Number 5, Minor Threat. Number 4, Black Flag. Number 3, Husker Du. Number 2, Black Sabbath. And number 1, Rush. And like I said, I catch up with Matt Johnson for some bonus material at the end of this episode. We actually had a more thorough discussion about our lists, but we had a record fail, and I won't tell you whose fault it was because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But I think for you old school tooth and nail fans, you'll enjoy some of the reminiscing at the end of this episode. But for right now, hope you enjoy Logan, my brother, and myself going through our top 41 through 50 bands for part 1 of our top 50 favorite bands. All right, we're back on this thing with Logan. I was thinking about this, guys. You know, there's only particular personalities that even think this way, that even care about this sort of thing. Like, there's some people that they listen to music casually, you know, to the radio. It's always like background music. Then there's some people that are really into music, and they really do invest in, you know, different bands and I don't know, wear the t-shirts and really get into it. But then there's a chosen few that enjoy conversations of like lists
Yes.
of favorites and stuff. And Logan, I don't know if you're in that category or if we pulled you into this thing.
Oh no, I love a good list. This was really difficult for me just because I'm very much a completist, and so this list took me so freaking long because I just could not bear the thought of leaving somebody out.
Yeah, I had to leave some people out that killed me to leave out. But what were y'all's criteria like coming up with this list? And I was telling Jared a second ago, Logan, how I just stay away from my list now because I will see something that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I would have them this high, but it's like it really is music.
It's gut.
Yeah, and it kind of is. It's kind of a blink of time. I mean, it's like you can put in a disc, or that's old school. You can push play on your iPhone and or listen to your vinyl, and it like a song can captivate you, or a band can captivate you, or you can be like, not really in the mood. So if you make your list after hearing something and saying, not really in the mood, but it could still be one of your favorite albums, or maybe your criteria is, no, if it's in my top 10, it's something that I can listen to any second of any day and enjoy it every single time, which that's not criteria for me. I think for me, some of it is season of life, like definitely what sort of memories it brings back. For me, personality of the band plays into it a little bit, not too much. And then the lyrics, songs, obviously. And then I think there were some that made it really high on my list with just one album. I mean, just an album that came out that is just one of my all-time favorite albums, and so they have to be one of my all-time, favorite bands. But
see, that was one of my criteria. It had to be a band that had been around for a bit.
Yeah,
they had to have released multiple albums, because not anyone. It's a lot easier to make one good album than 6.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, here's an example, and this will be somewhat of a spoiler, but I have the National pretty high on my list, and there's not one National album that from start to finish I just love every single song, but the best National songs for me are some of my favorite songs of all time. So it's just like I cannot leave them out. Like that, like literally my favorite song is by the National, so it's
What song is it? I'm curious.
It's the song that ends on my favorite movie, Win Win, with Paul Giamatti. It's called I Think You Can Wait. But I love that song. So all right, so that's some criteria that Logan gave. What are some other things that you guys considered in putting this list together?
Well, I think for me too, it's the impact it made in my life at a given point in time. So a lot of these bands are kind of old school. Like when I was a teenager in college, it informed my personal aesthetic, what I wanted to look like, how I wanted to dress based on these bands. But I mean, first and foremost, it was the music, the way the music spoke to me at that time of my life, the lyrics, of course. But I just cannot deny that aesthetic part of it really meant a lot to me at various points in my life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then another one for me was, because a lot of times I could absolutely love a band and they can put out 3 great albums, but then if they put out a bad album, that just kind of ruins the band for me.
Really?
Or at least there have been bands that I just can't listen to anymore because they put out a terrible album.
That's interesting. Because
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it would seem to be the case that you could have a favorite band that puts out an album that you're like, not too fond of that one, but why would that disqualify them? That's Logan's criteria, I guess.
I mean, it's not something that I've like, I didn't make that a rule. It just happens. Like,
yeah, it makes sense.
If somebody puts out an album, like Well, that being said, Weezer still makes my list, but they put out some pretty bad albums. But I think that the first couple go with what Jared was saying about the impact it made. But so I think that's probably the only one on the list that has put out an album that I objectively hated.
Gotcha.
Strong words. Wow.
All right.
Hey, I'm a 100% man. I either love something or I hate it. There's very little in between.
All right.
All right. Well, we're going to do something fun before going into our 41 to 50. And, Logan, maybe email me your list just in case, like, you die, or Jared, if you die, like, just so we have your whole list, because we're just going to do 41 through 50 tonight. But let me do a little exercise here. So here's what you're going to do is I'm going to name 2 bands and or 2 albums, and basically it's kind of a contest, but it's more of a discussion, fun little activity. But basically what you're going to try to do is name which one you like better. And so if you're very indecisive, this is going to be very, very hard. If you're a very decisive person, and then some of these will be no-brainers, some of them you'll have to think about. But the idea is to see which person can be the most decisive the quickest. So
I don't think Logan's very indecisive. I think he'll have no problem with this.
That's a fact.
All right. So first one, Smashing Pumpkins or Weezer?
Weezer.
Weezer, yeah.
Oh, Jared.
It's funny. It's funny. So spoiler alert. Well, probably shouldn't say it. Well, never mind. I won't say it.
All right. Pixies or Dinosaur Jr.?
Pixies.
Dinosaur Jr.
Justice for All or Appetite for Destruction?
Justice for All.
Justice for All.
Beach Boys or Beatles?
Beach Boys.
Descendants or Black Flag?
Descendants.
Beastie Boys or Tupac?
Beastie Boys.
Beastie Boys.
Pearl Jam or Rage Against the Machine?
Rage Against the Machine.
I can't pick either. I don't like either band.
Wow.
Fair enough. All right. So here's the bands that I had a hard time leaving off, and I'll just read right through them. Basically, Sturgill Simpson, Hotel Year, Explorers Club is a good friend of mine that play Beachy Boy type music. That is.
Oh yeah, I like one of his albums quite a bit.
Yeah, high quality stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big Crit, one of my favorite rappers that didn't make it, Starflyer 59. And then Caribou was another one that I really hated leaving off the list. Jared, I know you have Logan, you may not be prepared to give a few that you hated leaving off the list, but who are some of yours, Jared?
Knapsack, a really great emo band. In fact, one of their albums is in my top 10 of all time, so very tough to leave out. But just I never got into any of their other albums.
Yeah.
Dark Throne's a classic black metal band that I really, really like. Snapcase is a standby hardcore band that I dig. The Menzingers I discovered probably 6 years ago. Quality, like punk stuff, poppy punk stuff. And then Jimmy Eat World, I know it's probably going to be in your top 50. Love Jimmy Eat World, but just never had an album that I absolutely adored that would put them into the top 50.
Gotcha. True that. Any off the top of your head, Logan?
No, I also...
Did you have a hard time leaving Amy Grant off?
Well, Amy Grant.
I did.
Who said I left Amy Grant off? No, I didn't really. Like once I made the decision, it was pretty easy. I didn't really think too hard. I just went with gut reaction.
Yeah, I feel you.
I kind of did it in a bracket form and just kept updating the brackets. So it always came down to 1 or 2 bands, So ultimately, it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah. All right. Well, I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my 50 to 41, and then we'll let Jared do his, and we'll let Logan do his. But my 50.
Wait, before we go on, can we comment, or you don't want us to comment about?
No, for sure. Just interrupt.
Okay.
Interrupt or whatever. But my number 50 is the only country artist, and it's Willie Nelson, and I just couldn't leave him off. There's just no way. I remember hearing him for the first time and recognizing I like country music if this is country music. I remember asking my friend Logan, you met Joel Green, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So I got in Joel Green's car. He's listening to Willie Nelson. I was like, "This is Willie Nelson?" He said, "Yeah." I was like, "So this is a country album?" He's like, "Yes." I was like, "Well, I absolutely love this." So number 50 is Willie Nelson. Number 49 is Tooth and Nail's old school garage band Lo-Fi Joe Christmas. 48 is, I guess, my only metal band, and that would be Zayo.
Nice.
Zayo is one of those heavy bands that I can listen to pretty much anytime and enjoy it. 47 is Joel Hamilton, a personal friend of mine. You can look him up under working title, Mechanical River, but unbelievable creative musician. What really tipped the scales of putting him on this list is I've never seen him live and not been totally captivated. It's like that band that when you see, you don't want to be distracted. You just want to watch. You just want to listen because it just sucks you in. 46.
Wait. What kind of venues did he play? Joel Hamilton. Like, where would he play?
Just little bars in Charleston. I
Oh,
saw
cool.
his band Working Title play at, I think, the Music Farm. When he
Was Working Title on Doghouse?
I don't know if they ended up on Doghouse. They got screwed by a major label. So basically, when he was in high school, Working Title was like a really poppy rock band, where now he's like weirdo. Most people that don't have an ear for unique sounding music wouldn't listen to. But right out of high school, very poppy rock music. He even had a song on one of the American Pie soundtracks.
Wow.
And I think it was Warner Brothers that basically signed them and then did nothing with it, didn't promote it. And they actually had to
that's what it was.
Go about some business, getting rights to that album again. But yeah, definitely got screwed over a little bit there. I forgot what the major label was, but one of those big ones.
Can you recommend a starting album for me to sink my teeth into for that?
Aficionado. I think I already.
Okay, yeah, I think I do remember hearing that. I did like that.
Yeah, and then Gunnin, Gunnin by the Working Title. That's basically when he started getting way more unique and less rock sounding.
Okay.
Really good.
It looks like they were on Universal, by the way.
Okay, gotcha. 46 is Stars. Not a lot of people have heard of this album, but definitely one of those male, female vocalist duos, and just beautiful, beautiful music. 45 definitely has to do with the season of life and just the beauty of this band, but they're called Recess Theory. And they did a split with Further Seems Forever.
They're from West Palm.
Yeah, they ended up being changing their name to Legends of Rodeo, but his name is John Ralston. And I actually,
I remember him.
Yeah, before putting them on the list, I actually had to revisit the music, and I started doing. I was like, yeah, there's just no way I can leave this band off. Number 44 is Elliott Smith. 43 is the Christian hip hop artist Lecrae. 42 is Vince Staples,
Nice.
hip hop master. And then 41 is John Mark McMillan, who has in the last 5 years just been spitting out music that's I just can't believe how good it is. Very, very creative, kind of dark 80s poppy sort of vibe. Great stuff. So that is my 50 to 41, my friends.
I like it, man.
I would say your Willie Nelson, what got you into country, that for me was Sturgill Simpson, who you left off.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't have I didn't put him on my list though, just because I feel like he's too new. He hasn't had enough albums.
Yeah, totally.
But I've loved both. Well, actually, no. I guess he has had 3. I just haven't heard of one of them yet. Well, oh well. He didn't make my list either.
I would say for me, it was definitely Merle Haggard. With Joey, you turned me on to Merle Haggard, and he's what really got me into country music.
Yeah.
So now I appreciate like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, but Merle Haggard was it for me. starting point. All right, so the first one, number 50, is an old school thrash band. Back to my sheltered Christian life, it was Vengeance Rising. The first time I ever heard like heavily guttural vocals. Very good combination of thrash and death. 49 was another old school band, Poor Old Lou from Seattle.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, so they put out some really dope albums in the early 90s. 48.
Would you say Jesse Sprinkle is at least one of the most impressive recorded drummers? I mean, I don't.
He's all over the place. Yeah, he's all over the place. I love the way he plays. It's like an octopus. 48 is kind of an obscure metal band. If you're into the doom stoner rock stuff, the band called Sleep. I really enjoy their stuff a lot.
Absolutely.
They have an album called Dope Smoker, which is like an hour and 10-minute long song of just pure doom bliss. Absolutely love it. 47, along the same veins as Black Sabbath. Their first 3 albums blow my mind. I never really got too much into their later stuff. I did like the Dio album, the one with the angels smoking on the cover, Heaven and Hell, I think it is. But the Ozzy Osbourne first 3 albums are just ridiculously good. 46 is an old school metalcore band called ISIS. They were on Hydra Head Records back in the, I guess, the 2000s, mid-2000s. Kind of like a post-metal, metal gaze type sound.
I believe what the term is sludge.
Sludge, I'll give you that. Yeah, sludge for sure. Good stuff. My favorite album by them is Panopticon. Probably one of my all-time favorite metal albums, period. 45, this is a high school band for me, King's X, a nice prog rock band. And
Logan's laughing. Are you laughing at him?
It's just funny.
Yeah,
I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing with him.
It's a thing that, like, back in the day. I mean, I still like to listen to them, but back in the day, there were lyrics. Good.
I'm sorry. I was thinking of Static X.
Oh no!
That's why I was laughing.
No. Yeah. It is funny. I think on a previous podcast, I think I was saying how much I really don't like progressive rock, progressive metal. And I think King's X is an example, people would say, of progressive rock, progressive metal. But for whatever it is, I love their vocals. I love their music. I love their lyrics. So definitely a top 50 band for me. 44, My Bloody Valentine. I guess this is where maybe I would differ from Logan, because for me, Loveless is such an epic album that that single-handedly puts them in my top 50. I do appreciate their other albums, but really Loveless is what did it for me. 43 is a hip-hop artist named Aesop Rock, kind of an underground guy, and I've been into his stuff for the last 10 years. He is a wordsmith like no other. I mean, his lyrics are just really, really good. 42 is a band I discovered probably 5 or 6 years ago. It's kind of a emo revival band called The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die. Really cool post-rock emo type band. And then 41, classic 90s alternative rock, actually 80s, 90s Pixies. And my wife turned me on to the Pixies probably 15 years or so ago. So I was late to the party, but I absolutely love that band. I saw them live last summer, and they played an hour-and-a-half long set. It was unbelievable. So
I like how you say you're late to the party with the Pixies 15 years ago, and I started listening to them this year.
So you were really late to the party.
Oh yeah,
better late than never, man.
I missed the party's over, man. I'm watching recordings of that party.
Right.
Did you ever watch the documentary that they put out?
No, never did. No.
It's kind of a bummer.
Okay.
Just it was during their first
thanks for letting us know that, Logan.
Well, it's just it was their first reunion, so they'd been gone for a long time, and it was just weird because I was used to seeing them as much younger people, and then seeing them as like 40-something-year-olds. It was just like, and they still had problems they were dealing with, just being adults, and it was
right.
It was a bummer.
All right, Logan, let's hear it.
All right, number 50 is Planes Mistaken for Stars.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, cool. Nice pick.
I always loved them just because, like, they were considered emo, but they were so much gnarlier than emo that that it was always weird to me that a band like that could exist in the emo scene while to me not being emo at all. 49 is a band. This looks like one of the only current bands on my list so far. A Giant Dog. They're out of Austin, Texas, and they play, I guess, just straight up rock and roll music. It's a lady singer, or it's kind of guy-girl vocals, and it's just so much fun. Very poppy, but also kind of garagey.
And they're a current band? They're still making stuff?
Yeah, they're still making stuff, and they keep getting better.
Wow.
And all of their album titles are puns off their names. So like a giant dog pile, a giant dog bone, stuff like that.
A giant dog pile.
Yeah. That's one I said. Thanks for repeating exactly what I said.
Hey, what would be a good starting point? Toy, bone, fight, pie. I'm looking at their albums right now.
Yeah, I would say I can be kind of bad with album titles, but I think their most recent one's great. I mean, they haven't put out a bad album yet though, so I think you could start with any of those. I believe the one with the two heads, two weird heads, that's the one I like the best.
Word up.
48 is Jets Brazil.
Yes, love that band.
You'll be hearing more about Blake later on in my list. You do not, absolutely. You do not love Just Brazil?
No, and I remember going to their concert, and I was like, "What am I doing here? This just."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. I don't. It's very unpopular.
Hey, Logan, music's a personal journey.
What's your favorite album by them? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I don't like them. I didn't like the show, and
I didn't say Joey. I said Logan.
Yeah. Man, God, I mean, I liked all of them a lot, but I do think it is Orange Rhyming Dictionary.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Yeah, solid album.
But Four Cornered Night was so good. I don't like Perfecting Loneliness as much, but Orange Rhyming Dictionary is just one of the best albums in my opinion.
Nice.
And it's basically like it feels like it would have been kind of the next Jawbreaker album if it was a little bit faster. It was very much on that Dear You level.
Okay.
47 is a weird instrumental avant-garde kind of band. I've heard them referred to themselves jokingly, but it works as Tibetan crime jazz. It is a band called Grails.
Huh.
And they're kind of, I don't know, they got their start on the label that Neurosis puts out, Neuro Recordings.
Yeah.
And it very much fits with that, like they're kind of doomy but instrumental. They're just so good.
Okay.
It's a weird listen, but it's worth it every time.
So you would say more experimental than Neurosis?
Much more experimental.
Okay.
I mean, they do. At one point, they released an album that was interpretations of 3 psychedelic songs from around the world, and so it was like they did a band from Japan that is going to be on. That is probably they didn't make my list just because they only had one spectacular album, but this band called Flower Traveling Band that was basically Japan's answer to Black Sabbath, except they made their own instruments, and so it just sounds super weird but so good. Yeah, they just do. It's just very. It feels improvisational, but I mean, it's not. They write the songs. It's so good. Grails is a band to check out.
Okay, good to know.
46 is an indie rock band called Frog Eyes that up until recently was an active band, but they broke up just last year. The singer is a real goofball, and he has does a kind of a mix between sing and talking, and it's just very quirky,
Like a
and
Me
lots
Without
of
You
instrumentation.
sort of thing?
No, well, that if it wasn't a mix of sing and yelling.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's definitely more musical than Me Without Your than Me Without You's vocals.
Gotcha.
But it's very quirky indie rock. At least their first couple albums.
Logan by far wins most indie.
Most obscure.
Yeah.
This is how I roll, man.
Giant animal, big frog eyes. I'm butchering these names, but
45 is a band called Spiritualized.
I've heard about them. I've never listened to them, but I've heard of them. Yeah.
It's there was this band in the 80s called Spacemen 3 that was basically a psychedelic revival band, and this is a longer running project of the singer of Spaceman 3, and it's another psych band, but a little bit more it's not as trippy, let's say. And then towards the end they got a little bit more mellow and less psychedelic too. They just put out their final album as well, and it was brilliant. Number 44 is Future Islands.
Oh yeah, I just don't like that guy's voice. That's what kept me from liking that. But
yeah,
I respect the band. You're the one that told me about him, and I'm glad that I checked him out, and I just couldn't get into the guy's voice.
Yeah, his voice, I would say his voice is a little polarizing. One of my friends said that they sound like the Cowardly Lion started a band. And
I can see that.
It's pretty accurate. But yeah, I think that's why I like it. He has such a strange voice, but he makes it work.
Yeah.
He's a hell of a performer too.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the cool thing about strange voices is you either love them or you hate them. I mean, because there's definitely some strange voices that I have loved for sure. It's just whatever floats your boat sort of thing.
Absolutely. Number 43 is True Widow, and they're kind of a shoegazy noise band out of Texas. It's like a little doomy too, but it's brilliant. I don't know what else to say about them.
Okay.
But I've loved every album. 42 is Mates of State, a husband and wife duo.
I remember them, yeah.
And don't they just have like drums and synth or something like that?
Yeah, drums and keyboards.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty impressive stuff for sure.
Yeah, for it being a two-piece, it still sounds very full. I guess that's the benefit of one of those pieces being a keyboard, where you can just add so many different layers. And like all of their songs are pretty much just about them and their fights and whatnot, so that's kind of cool too. And then 41 is stoner rock band Dead Meadow.
Dead Meadow. I think I've heard of them, but know nothing about them. So you said a stoner rock?
Yeah, they've been around for a long time. Their new stuff isn't super great, but for a while, like they were a stoner band on Matador, which I always thought was kind of interesting.
Huh? Yeah.
They put out several albums on Matador before striking out on their own, and yeah, they bring it.
Well, awesome. That's pretty cool. I love this. I'm looking forward to 40 through 31. It's going to get interesting. So enjoyed it, fellas.
Absolutely.
And,
Me too.
We'll catch you guys. All right, well, we are here with Matt Johnson. And Matt, I know you as not only the guy that helped write my book, Fundamentalism, but going way back earlier, you're the Roadside Monument guy.
I'm the Roadside Monument guy. Not the original Roadside Monument guy, but one of them.
So, when did you play for Roadside? Like, what albums were you a part of?
Not the first one. Beside this brief hexagonal, however you say that, I didn't technically play on that, but I actually played the release show for that record.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the band had a major lineup change right when the record dropped. So
Gotcha.
I was pretty much in the band from the beginning, but didn't play on that first record.
Yeah. It's super cool, man, to, with Bad Christian and then Matt's connections in Seattle just over the years to connect on a personal level with people who played music that were super impactful for me in my life. I mean, I literally remember hearing about Roadside Monument. Like, there's a lot of hype, and we're in real time listeners, and nobody knows where my brother is right now. So we're waiting for him to pop in at any time. But I was going to ask Jared, like, where was that hype coming from? Because I remember we were it's so neat to think of that day and age, because there wasn't internet, but there was such a buzz about Tooth and Nail, and I don't know if it was magazines that we read that Roadside Monument was a band to look out for, so we went ahead and ordered the 7-inch, waiting for the full-length CD, and I remember hearing it.
I love that 7-inch.
And it's interesting because I wasn't, around that time, I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music, so like Joe Christmas introduced me to that noisy lo-fi sound that, most people were introduced with Dinosaur Jr. or Sebado, or, even further back. Roadside Monument is literally my introduction to what I call classic emo. I would say Roadside Monument, and then Blenderhead's Muchacho Vivo. So it's just it's neat. I mean, it's neat to be friends with someone like you, and we were just talking about the show that you guys played with Stavesacre in Myrtle Beach, and that was a super memorable show for me because that's the first time I ever heard screaming and singing at the same time. First time. And that's it's like it's on the same level as seeing my first real punk show, Scaterd Few, back in 1999, was seeing you guys in Myrtle Beach, because I'm seriously standing there watching you guys, and there's probably a room of 60, 75 people, and I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like, this may be the coolest, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. This guy screaming. Would that have been Jonathan Ford screaming?
Yeah, Jonathan was the primary screamer for sure.
Yeah, and then the singing, it was like, oh my gosh, that's just unbelievable. So awesome. Do you remember? I mean, do you have any memories of the Myrtle Beach show? Probably not.
A little bit. I remember the sound guy was a dick. We had our roadie sort of doubled as our sound guy. And we used to play a venue in Seattle called the Velvet Elvis, and he knew how to dial in our sound really well, so we brought him on the road. And he wasn't like a super experienced sound guy, but he just knew how to dial our sound in. So he would always try and elbow his way into the control booth, and kind of always had to feel it out whether the person was friendly or not. But the guy wasn't very friendly that night. But I do remember the show was fun, and I was doubling on that tour too, playing for Stavesacre. They had just gotten Sam West. That was after Friction came out and they lost Jeremy. Then Sam West agreed to play with them, but he couldn't go on that tour. So they were sort of in a transition. Roadside was opening that tour, and so I just did double duty on it. So that was fun.
Nice.
And that was amazing for me too as a fan. Not only was I a fan of Roadside before I joined, but I was a huge fan of Mark Solomon and the Crucified guys. Dude, when I was in high school, that was it, So it was kind of amazing that I got to know Mark personally. We became friends. It was I was a little bit starstruck, So that was a rad tour.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember. I'm pretty sure that's the concert where I teased Jared about this to this day, because he literally. I mean, he can't speak for himself right now, but I would say he idolized Mark Solomon. I mean, because my brother had his head shaved, and so when we were at the show, Mark Solomon happened to have been wearing a short sleeve, button down navy blue shirt. Looks like maybe he got it at a thrift store, and my brother was wearing the exact same type of shirt. And so my brother from the crowd between songs, he's like, "Hey Mark, I like your shirt, man." And Mark looks at his shirt like, why do you like this? And I don't think he noticed that my brother had the same thing, but he was just like, okay, cool.
That's funny.
Do you realize how special of an era of music and thing that you are part of? Like, do you think of it that way? Because as fans, being a part of the tooth and nail culture, and you were a fan also, like how you talk about Mark Solomon and Stavesacre. I mean, does that occur to you that you were part of something special?
Yeah, I think it sort of takes time to get like the broad view of it over time. But yeah, it's kind of a trip now, especially with like all the podcasts that are coming out and folks are talking about like all these, different times of music history or whatever. It is kind of a trip to go like, oh yeah, that was pretty significant, and I think for a lot of reasons, not just, the tooth and nail scene was, it's so oddball because, if you remember the first cycle of records, that they were putting out like all kinds of genres, that doesn't usually happen. Like most labels, right. Most indie labels are like focused on a particular genre.
No pun intended. You said focused. Go ahead.
Hardcore 94, baby. Hardcore 94.
There you go.
But, yeah, it's very oddball because you've got like a particular subculture, like the Christian subculture, indie culture sort of colliding. And then a lot of kids like yourself, and when I was in high school, I sort of self-regulated that stuff too, where I was like, well, like I want to be a good Christian kid, so I'm not gonna like listen to non-Christian music. So like I wasn't even getting that from my parents or my church. That was just something I chose for myself, which, a couple of years in, that found out to be kind of bullshitty. But
yeah,
but like when you put those kind of constraints on it, and then you look at what's actually out there, it's like, okay, there's this lame CCM stuff, like what's sort of under the radar. And then I would end up listening to stuff that was kind of across the board, And I know a lot of other kids had that experience too. They wouldn't have heard that kind of music otherwise because you had this little sandbox. It's like, okay, if my mom's only letting me go to the Christian bookstore to get music, I just want to find something that's interesting. Well, if it weren't for those constraints, I don't think a lot of kids would have come across that kind of music. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because some of that genre stuff, they wouldn't have had any other entry point to it. Right. So yeah, it's sort of oddball. You have these two worlds like coming together, and then you have the debates too. It's sort of a peripheral thing, but like, what does quote unquote Christian music mean? Totally. And so like Roadside and Blenderhead, we were sort of on this weird fence where it was like, I don't think Brandon initially intended for Tooth and Nail to be like a quote unquote Christian label, and that's kind of what we signed up for. But then we realized, oh, there's a whole like culture attached to this, or a culture that attached to it. And then the identity of the label changed over time. So I think there's a lot of like coalescing factors that come together that make it really interesting.
Yeah. Awesome.